All right. So good morning from my end. This is day two. So we'll be looking at for the week four. So we'll be looking at working with APIs. Working with APIs. Um, Yesterday, day one of week four, we tried to see how we can we tried to okay. So yesterday we looked at functional programming, which has to do with how to make use of Lambda, make use of make use of map, filter, reduce, and all of this inside how do they call it? Lambda function, right? So that's just what we did yesterday. So today we'll look at how to make use of APIs. API. So what is API? API is actually an application programming interface. So it is a communication mechanism, right? Sorry, I didn't put up that explanation here, but you can always look up that on Google. So it's a mechanical or a mechanism rather that communicates or allows um interaction between programs, right? So um like for instance, I have a website and then I need to interact with that website, right? From with my code. So what helps me interact with the back end of the website is my API. And there are several types of APIs. We have the private API. So this one is used to connect software components within a single organization. So within a single organization, what kind of API you can use to connect uh those software components, right? So look at it this way. Private APIs are used to connect different software components. So for instance, you have what software we're going to use right now? Um, very quickly. Okay, so we have Microsoft's Office, right? As a package, as a single organization. And then I need to interact between Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access, and all that. So that single interaction that helps you, that's phenomenon that helps you interact between those three guys or between the software components is known as private APIs. And those kind of APIs are not always available for third party use. Like you want to access Microsoft and all of that. It's not allowed, right? And then there's another one known as public API. Public API are open APIs. Because they are public, they are open. Anyone can have access to them. So they are accessible over the internet and are available to developers and the public. So those kind of APIs are, let's say, Twitter API that you want to get some information or make some requests from Twitter, just like a project we did about requesting, I think, a doc feces in a particular project like that. So these APIs, and the third one, which is the last for this category, is partner APIs. So partner APIs are shared with business partners and have signed agreements with the publishers. So they are commonly used for software integration between two parties. So let's say, for instance, Instagram and Facebook want to have a kind of communication, despite the fact that it's the same person that has it. But I know there are going to be two different boards running it, the software. So that's particular um, interaction between the two organizations is going to be done, and having access to each of their APIs is going to be made available by a signed agreement, and as well, um, yeah, a signed agreement, and it's used to integrate software together so they can share. That's why you realize most times if you want to post on Facebook, it's gonna automatically go to Instagram, or if you want to post on Instagram, there's some form of relationship those guys have. So for the purpose of our class, we'll be looking at HTTP request, hypertext transform programming, and request for with the request library. So this is the library we are going to use for request. So the request library is a popular and easy to use library, right? It is one of the easiest library to use for making HTTP requests. HTTP request. So if you want to make HTTP request, that's um the hypertext transfer protocols rather. You will want to make use of what? A library that is known as request, right? So what is HTTP? Let's try to dwell on that a bit. HTTP is actually for the purpose of the full meaning, hypertext transfer protocols, right? Right? And then it is an application protocol that is used for distribution or for distributed collaborative hypermedia information. So it contains information that can be distributed, that can be affiliated. That's where the collaboration comes in, and then some hypermedia as well that allows users to communicate data on the World Wide Web. So for you to be able to communicate data on the World Wide Web, that's www. You make use of what? Your hypertext transfer protocol. So that will grant you access to the worldwide web, right? So from there, we can now pick out the information you want to get. So installing request is very simple. Make a pip. That's if you've not made use of request before. So this is the first thing you do. Pip install request. So how do you do this pip install request? You come to your main directory, and on the new you see your terminal, right? So you can now write in your, sorry, this guy is not too sure. All right. So you can now do what? Your pip request here, and you hit the enter button. It will download for you. But for me, I've installed it, so no need not to install it the second time. So making a get request. A get request is used to retrieve data from a server, right? So we started with APIs, right? And then we said that APIs are what? Application programming interface. So that particular interface, let's say they are like Twitter and all of that. And then we went further to looking at HTTP request. So HTTP request allows you to get what? Information from where? The World Wide Web. And how do we now make use of the HTTP? We make use of it through a library known as request itself. So request is just like I want to get something, right? So that's just the normal thing. I want to get something. So you do what? You request. I get it. So But for you to make use of the request effectively, there is a there is a function which is a subset of requests inside of the module request is known as what get. So it's more like you're requesting to get something. So it's as simple as that. That's why Python is very, very sweet. So if I request to get something, I'll expect to do what? Have a feedback, right? So here we are. Let's see a snippet of some codes here. So I have import request, right? Mind you, this comes in after I have installed this guy here, right? So when I'm done with that, I can now say what? Import request. So import request will now go to where I have installed it from my terminal. And then before I import request, remember, all these things I'm explaining have what? Categories. The API, the HTTP, request, and get. So it's kind of gradually explaining how we can get access to what information. That's just basically what we're doing. So for you to, after you've imported this guy, request, the next thing to do is what? The website which you want to get your information from, right? So, but what this request guy does is that it's just sending, how do you call it now? It sends in a prompt, yeah, that's the word, a prompt to the website server that, look, I want to make a request from this, right? And then you now initialize another variable known as response. So this response is where you initiate your request, right? Request and then dot get. So you're requesting to get information from this URL, right? So this URL is the URL is actually what? The uniform resource locator. That's URL. So what does URL do? URL tells you or is a web address, right? That specifies the location of a resource on the computer network and how to retrieve it. So for instance, we can make use of Twitter. So if you know any Twitter post and you want to get some information from that Twitter post, you can come here to this URL and post it here, right? So by so doing, everything that is on that particular page will be displayed here. So you now have response.request, sorry, response equals to request.get, then open and close your URL inside of it. This URL you've initiated here. So print response.status underscore code. So this guy gives you the HTTP status code, and then response.text gives you the content in that particular web page, right? So let's run this guy to see what comes up. So the HTTP status code is what? 200. And then the response text is what? Here is the response text. We have user ID, you have ID, you have title to be what? Sound, replay. So this is actually an example. So I got this guy from JSON placeholder. Is a type code web, right? So having gotten this, how do we now paste API responses? Pasting API responses. So this is a response we got from API, right? So how do we paste API response? So most API return, most APIs rather, return data in JSON format. Remember what we talked about JSON format? They're always in dictionary kind of expression, right? So we have user ID to be the key, and then this guy is a value, just like that. So it's in JSON file, but uh, in JSON file, which can be pasted using Python's inbuilt JSON model, right? So let's see if this guy can be pasted using JSON model. Okay. So what I now did was to do what? To paste JSON response, right? It's still the same website, but now I'm making use of what? Response.json. So what this will do for me is that it will remove, it will reduce this response and write it in such a way that it will become smaller and almost on the same page, right? So it's still a JSON file because this two is what? This is a user ID and then this is the key, right? So this is just how to get your requests um from any website. So this one, you'll fetch, it will return your data in a JSON file. So it doesn't really paste your information the way you want it. So I think the next class will try to explain that more renowned. So I have a practice here. It's just a simple one. Fetching weather data from an API. So we use weather API. So I think you can as well check out for Twitter API and try to see if you can fetch one or two information from any of the posts on Twitter, right? That will help you, and it will help you make you perfect in this business. So use a weather API to fetch and display the current API weather information for a given city. So prerequisite, you sign up to for a free API. So one other thing I didn't explain because I was using a dummy site is that you need to always sign up for a free API. Like the Twitter API, why I didn't want to use it for this training is that I will likely need it for a project, so that's why I'm keeping it pending, so that my request intervals will not be disturbed. And when you're requesting to use an API, you will always want to state the reason. So, for studies is actually a good reason to build your portfolio and all of that. So, you sign up for a free API key at what weather, open weather map. So you can check that or a similar service, anyone of your choice. So these guys are just dummies, API, City, Calabar, and this one. So all these things are just what I did myself. But this guy is not gonna run because I don't have access to this API, right? So fail to fetch weather data. Please check the API key or the city name. So I think the problem is with the API key because I don't have access to this API key. So I'll leave you with it. Register for it or sign up for the API and see if you can. Here is how the weather API looks like, right? So you can sign in for it. All right. I don't have an account, so I can create one. Um, I would like to do this on my own, so not on this call. So just the same process, sign up, then before you come running this code. So if you have any question, you try to reach out to me, and that will be all for today's class. I was supposed to include it with the beautiful soup, but I want to do that separately. So when you watch the video, the sequence will be organized, right? So that's all for now.